It started with a faint click one night, barely audible under the hum of my refrigerator, but it was enough to drag me out of half-sleep. I remember staring out my window at the faint glow from next door, confused why my electric meter was ticking like a slot machine at midnight. I walked outside, barefoot on cool concrete, and that's when I saw it, a sleek white Tesla plugged into my outdoor socket. Not her socket. Mine. The cord snaked across the property line like a smug, metallic vine, feeding her car off my power box. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. My neighbor, Karen, yes, her real name, had only moved in 3 weeks ago, and she'd been parading around like a sustainability queen ever since. "We're a green family," she told everyone at the block meet and greet. "We're investing in a cleaner future." I hadn't realized cleaner meant draining my electricity every night. I unplugged her Tesla gently, coiled the cord, and laid it neatly on her driveway. No note, no confrontation. I figured an adult would understand what had happened when she saw her car half-charged in the morning. The next evening, though, I heard that same telltale click. The meter spun again, faster this time. This time I marched out with a flashlight. The Tesla was there again, charging off my power box. Karen wasn't subtle. She'd even left her garden lights on, spotlighting her driveway like a stage. I followed the cable, unplugged it again, and that's when I noticed she'd taped over my outlet's cover. She'd actually labeled it, Shared Community Access. I stood there for a full minute, stunned by the audacity. The next morning, she was waiting for me at the mailbox. "Good morning," she chirped, in that tone people use when they're about to guilt-trip you. "I saw you unplugged my car last night. Was there an issue?" I told her yes, she was stealing my power. Her smile froze but didn't fall. "Oh, I thought we were supposed to share resources," she said. "That outlet is practically on the line." "Practically, but not legally," I corrected. She waved me off. "Well, I'll talk to the HOA president. He'll clarify it." Clarify it he did, by sending me a letter 2 days later. It said, in polite bureaucratic font, that I was to cease interference with community charging arrangements. Apparently Karen had pitched it as a neighborhood EV initiative, and the HOA had lapped it up like it was gospel. The letter didn't come with any evidence, just moral pressure and an implied fine if I obstructed eco-friendly practices. That night, I installed a small inline power meter between my breaker and the exterior socket. I wanted proof. By morning, it showed 12 kilowatt-hours gone overnight, roughly what it takes to run a Tesla for 30 miles. That's when I decided the game had to change. I didn't confront her directly again. Instead, I called my friend Nolan, an electrical engineer who had the kind of dry humor that makes you feel safe plotting petty revenge. He came over with a cup of coffee and stared at the setup. "So she's charging on your dime every night?" he asked. "Yup." "And the HOA's defending her?" "Yup." He sipped thoughtfully. "Then don't stop her. Just make it official." The next weekend, I installed a locked weatherproof outlet box. A proper one, industrial grade, bolted and sealed. Inside, I wired a timer relay and a switch connected to a smart plug. The socket looked identical to before, but now I could remotely cut power or schedule maintenance outages from my phone. When Karen came sniffing around that night, she plugged in like usual. The car charged for an hour, then the relay clicked off. At exactly 2 a.m., I turned it back on for 20 minutes, then off again. The Tesla's internal charger clicked and chirped in frustration. By the fourth cycle, her car gave up, flashing a bright orange warning. Charging interrupted. Check power source. I could see it from my window like a small victory flag. The next morning, she stormed over, bathrobe cinched like a judge's robe. "Your outlet's faulty," she declared. "It fried my charger." I reminded her it wasn't her outlet. "Then why is my car showing an error?" she demanded. I shrugged. "Maybe because it's not supposed to be using my power." Her eyes narrowed. "I've already reported you to the HOA for tampering with shared infrastructure." "Great," I said. "I have logs." I showed her the data from the meter, time-stamped, signed by the device manufacturer. She didn't expect evidence. She just stood there, deflated for a second before shifting tactic. Look, I didn't realize it was such a big deal. I thought it was a community thing. I'll pay you for what I used. It sounded almost reasonable until she offered $20. My electric bill showed $63. I declined politely and sent the HOA a copy of the power log along with a short, calm email. If this continues, I'll consider it theft. No insults, no drama, just the fact. They never replied, but Karen's Tesla stopped appearing for a few nights. I thought it was over. Then, one morning, I found my new lockbox smashed open. The latch was bent, the relay missing. The outlet cover was gone. And the Tesla was back, humming quietly. I checked my breaker, it was on. She'd rewired it herself. That's when the long game began. I replaced the outlet entirely, this time with a GFCI breaker and a thermal cutoff built into the line. Perfectly safe, perfectly legal, and perfectly within code. What it did, though, was detect unusual load patterns and automatically trip if someone tried to run continuous power through it overnight. The next time her Tesla plugged in, it would seem fine, until it didn't. For the next week, I played dumb. I waved at her, mowed my lawn, pretended I didn't notice the new scratches on my outlet box. Every night, the Tesla gulped down electrons for an hour before tripping the breaker. Every morning, she'd reset it, assuming she'd fixed it. By Friday, the relay had logged 8 trips. I knew the GFCI was doing its job. Then came the night that changed everything. I was watching a movie when I smelled something sharp, ozone and melted plastic. Through the window, I saw a flicker near her driveway. Karen was outside, yelling for her husband. The Tesla's charging port was sparking faintly, a ghostly blue arc against the white paint. I ran out with a fire extinguisher, even though I knew it wasn't my setup that failed. Her charger cable, her homemade replacement cable, I learned later, had shorted. She'd been borrowing my outlet so often she decided to build her own adapter to bypass the GFCI. When the small fire hissed out, she was shaking. "You did this," she shouted. "You sabotaged my car." I handed her the charred remains of her cable. "You built this." She didn't answer. "Because the scorch marks are on your side of the line." The HOA came running. Neighbors gathered. For once, I didn't have to say much. The melted cable told the story better than I could. Karen's husband pulled her back while she kept insisting I'd rigged something. But the board's electrician examined the remains and shook his head. "That's not code," he said. "That's a home-built adapter." Karen's face went pale under the streetlight. She tried to turn the story, claiming she'd only done it because I'd restricted community access. But the sympathy she'd relied on had evaporated in the smell of burnt wiring. That night, as the tow truck carried her Tesla away, my meter ticked softly in the quiet. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Sometimes justice doesn't come in flames. It comes in amps and volts, right where it hurts most. Near my boundary line. The investigator didn't say much, just took notes and thanked me. But 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox, a letter from her insurer stating her claim had been denied. The reason? Evidence suggests fault lies with claimant's own installation. That night, her lights went out again. Literally this time. Power company truck parked outside, technician disconnecting her line. When I stepped outside, I saw her watching from her porch, silent, pale, hollow-eyed. For the first time, she didn't glare. She just looked tired. For a strange, fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then she whispered, almost too quiet to hear, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I just went back inside, locked the door, and turned off the porch light. Because by then, I understood something vital. Karen wasn't fighting for power anymore. She was fighting for narrative, for the illusion that she still had control. And she didn't realize that the story had already left her hands. The next morning, a local news van pulled up. A reporter knocked, saying they were covering a neighborhood electrical safety dispute, after someone had tipped them off. I told them the truth, calmly, on record. They ran the story that evening. It was titled, Suburban Tesla Fire Tied to Faulty Backyard Charging Setup. They didn't name her, but everyone knew. By sunset, her house was dark again. No lights, no car, no cameras. Just a single for sale sign hammered into the front yard. It was over. Or so I thought. Because a week later, I found something new. On my power box, a single sticker. White background. Black text. This is not the end. By Monday, my phone had blown up with messages from neighbors, all asking the same question. Did you really set her car on fire? Apparently, Karen had wasted no time. Before the last ember cooled, she'd spun a new narrative, one where I was the jealous, vengeful neighbor sabotaging her for embracing the future. The HOA's group chat was flooded with her paragraphs-long tirades about harassment, retaliation, and electrical terrorism. At first, I ignored it, let her scream into the void. But the void was listening. A few neighbors started whispering. Someone posted a blurry photo of me outside during the fire, holding the extinguisher. Out of context, it looked bad. That's when I decided silence wasn't going to save me. The next morning, I printed out the official fire report, stapled it to a short note, and hand-delivered it to every house on our street. My note was simple. For your information, the cause of last night's incident was faulty wiring on private property. Please see attached documentation. Stay safe. I didn't mention her name once. I didn't need to. By noon, her story was collapsing. The same people who had doubted me were forwarding my note around like gospel. One even sent me a photo of Karen pacing on her driveway, phone in one hand, report in the other, fuming. That evening, she finally snapped. It was around 9 p.m. I was on my porch again when I saw her marching across the lawn, barefoot, still in her immaculate white robe like some avenging suburban ghost. She was holding a manila envelope. "You think you're so clever," she said, voice trembling but sharp. "You're not going to win." I didn't move. "Win what, exactly?" "This war you started," she shouted. "I know what you're doing. You're trying to humiliate me. You think this is funny?" I told her I thought it was exhausting. "You keep setting fires, literal fires, and somehow I'm the villain?" Her jaw tightened. She stepped closer. "You provoked this," she hissed. "You kept pushing me, spying on me, setting traps. You made everyone hate me." For the first time, I saw the cracks beneath the arrogance. She wasn't just angry, she was unraveling. I could see the guilt buried under layers of justification. But before I could say anything, she threw the envelope onto my porch and stormed off. Inside were photos, grainy, nighttime shots of my house, my truck, even me sitting by the window. Each was labeled with dates and times in red ink. At the bottom, one sentence: proof of harassment and surveillance. Filed with HOA and county authorities. I sat there staring at them, feeling a strange mix of anger and disbelief. She was documenting me. The next day, a county code enforcement officer showed up. He was polite, professional, and clearly uncomfortable. "We received a complaint about unpermitted electrical work and potential tampering with a neighbor's utilities," he said. I just gestured toward my filing cabinet. "You're gonna want to see this." By the time he left, he'd taken copies of everything. Photos, logs, inspection reports, emails from the power company, even the HOA's earlier letters. He shook his head as he left. "You've done everything by the book," he said. "If anything, she's the one violating half the codes in the county." But Karen didn't stop there. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from a law firm downtown. Cease and desist for defamation and harassment. Signed by an attorney named Lawrence M. Kane. The letter was filled with melodramatic phrases, emotional distress, targeted intimidation, character assassination. It demanded I remove all online posts related to Ms. R. and issue a formal apology. I almost laughed, until I saw the retainer line. She was actually paying a lawyer. I forwarded the letter to my own attorney, a calm, sharp woman named Aria who'd helped me during the HOA dispute. She read it once, smiled faintly, and said, "I'll handle it." Her response was brutal in its simplicity. One page, citing every documented incident of Karen's trespassing, electrical theft, and safety violations. She closed it with a single line. "If your client continues making false allegations, we will pursue damages for harassment and property endangerment." 3 hours after the letter went out, Karen's attorney dropped her as a client. I learned that from the same code officer who called me later. He realized what she'd been doing, he said. Didn't want to be part of it. For a few days after that, she disappeared. Curtains drawn, no lights on, mailbox overflowing. The silence was eerie, almost peaceful. Then, on Saturday morning, a new sign appeared in her yard. "Property under surveillance. Trespassers will be reported." It wasn't the sign that bothered me. It was the 4 new cameras pointing directly at my house. One aimed at my garage. One at my driveway. One at my living room window. One, somehow, angled over the fence into my backyard. That afternoon, I walked over. She was trimming her hedges, pretending not to see me. "Karen," I said calmly, "those cameras are facing my property. That's illegal." "They're for security," she replied without looking up. "Then point them at your property. I have reason to believe you're still tampering with my power system." I couldn't help but laugh. "You don't even have a power system anymore." She finally turned toward me, eyes red, face drawn. "You think you've won. You think you can make me the crazy one. But everyone will see. I'll prove it." That night, she proved something else instead. At 2 a.m., my security app pinged. "Motion detected." I opened the feed and froze. She was standing in her driveway, phone flashlight on, pointing it directly into my camera lens. Her other hand held what looked like a jug of liquid, clear, sloshing. Gasoline. I was outside in seconds, shouting before she could do anything. She froze, caught like a deer in headlights. For a terrifying moment, I thought she might actually go through with it. Then her husband came running out, grabbed the jug, and dragged her inside while she screamed at him. I stood there, shaking, watching the porch light flicker as their door slammed shut. The next morning, I filed a police report. The responding officer reviewed the footage, expression tightening as he watched. "That's enough," he said. "We'll get a restraining order." Took 3 days, but it went through. Karen was officially barred from approaching my property. The HOA had no choice but to back it, and the county added a note to her record for reckless endangerment. For the first time in months, I slept deeply. No buzzing meters, no glowing Tesla, no paranoid shadows pacing the fence line. But the story wasn't done writing itself. Because people like Karen don't just vanish, they pivot. A week later, I got a visit from an insurance investigator. "We're following up on a claim from your neighbor," he said. She reported an electrical fire caused by negligence from an adjoining property. Of course she had. She'd filed an insurance claim blaming me for her Tesla fire. I invited him in, made coffee, and laid everything out: reports, videos, logs, timestamp. I even replayed the fire footage, showing the spark starting inside her garage, nowhere. By the next morning, word had spread faster than wildfire, and ironically, that's exactly what Karen's driveway looked like. A blackened patch of concrete, a coiled, half-melted cable like a dead snake, and the faint smell of burnt polymer hanging in the air. The HOA's emergency newsletter went out that same afternoon, filled with phrases like "isolated incident" and "community electrical safety reminder." They never mentioned names, but everyone knew. It wasn't hard to connect "isolated incident" with the house that still had fire extinguisher residue on the driveway. Karen didn't make eye contact with me for 2 days. Then, on the 3rd morning, I noticed her garage door open and a brand new Tesla wall charger mounted inside. It was the official kind, shiny, branded, professionally installed. I almost smiled. Maybe she'd finally learned her lesson. Maybe, just maybe, this whole saga was over. I even caught myself thinking about baking a peace-offering batch of cookies to break the ice. But then I saw the electrician's van parked halfway across my lawn. The tire tracks were fresh, deep, and muddy. My sprinkler line had been crushed, and the van's heavy cable reels had flattened the grass I'd just reseeded last week. When I walked over to ask what they were doing, one of the guys shrugged. She said this was the shortest route to her panel box. He pointed to a conduit trench cutting straight through my flower bed. My rose bush, my late mother's rose bush, was split in half. Karen came out right then, sipping her iced coffee like nothing was wrong. "Oh hey, sorry about the mess," she said, gesturing vaguely at the destruction. "They just needed to run the conduit to the service line. It's a shared utility corridor." Shared utility corridor. That phrase again. I told her there was nothing shared about it. It was my lawn, my soil, my irrigation system. She gave me the kind of patronizing smile that makes your blood pressure climb. "You're being really territorial about something that benefits everyone," she said. "We all use power." The electrician looked at me apologetically and said, "Ma'am, we just do what the client signs off on." I asked to see the permit. Karen waved a few folded papers at me like a magician flashing a deck of cards. "It's all cleared with the HOA," she said. "Don't stress yourself." I did stress myself, just quietly. That night, I pulled the parcel map from the county website. My property line was crystal clear, right down to the inch. Her conduit trench cut 3 feet across my boundary. No ambiguity. I filed a complaint with the HOA and included drone photos for good measure. 2 days later, I got another letter, not from the HOA this time, but from Karen. A printed page taped to my door. It was titled Community Resolution Agreement. In it, she offered to allow me to keep the conduit trench where it was if I agreed not to interfere with electrical service connections or public right-of-way. Public right-of-way. She'd elevated her trespass into a civic duty. I didn't sign. I didn't even reply. Instead, I did something better. I called the county electrical inspector. They sent someone out within 48 hours. The man was polite, methodical, and very interested when I mentioned that her installer had crossed my property without a utility easement. He took measurements, photos, and note. When Karen saw him from her window, she came storming out again, waving her phone. "I already cleared this," she said. "The HOA approved it." "The HOA doesn't issue permits," the inspector said evenly. "And this line is on private property. Without written easement, it's a code violation." Her face turned crimson. "Are you kidding me?" "He's doing this because he hates me," she snapped, pointing at me. The inspector ignored her. He tagged the conduit with a bright orange sticker, "Stop work order." That evening, she banged on my door. "You had no right," she yelled before I even opened it fully. "You're sabotaging my charging system out of spite." I told her I wasn't sabotaging anything, I was protecting my property. "You cost me thousands," she shouted. "Do you know what that inspection delay means? My electrician can't finish the job." Her voice cracked somewhere between anger and panic. I stayed calm. I told her I'd be willing to let the conduit remain if she restored my lawn and rerouted the portion crossing my yard underground with a proper easement agreement. It was a reasonable offer. She stared at me like I'd just asked for her firstborn. "You think I'm going to negotiate with you over something that benefits the planet?" she spat. "You're ridiculous." Then she stormed off, heels clicking across the driveway like gunfire. 3 mornings later, I woke up to another sound, this one unmistakable. The distant whine of a power tool. When I stepped outside, I saw her standing over the trench, holding a cordless angle grinder, sparks flying. She was cutting through the inspector's bright orange stopwork tag. Her husband stood nearby, arms crossed, clearly unwilling to intervene. I walked closer, filming with my phone. Karen, you realize that's illegal, right? I said evenly. Tampering with a county order can get you fined. She looked up, hair wild, eyes blazing. You and your stupid drone ruined everything, she hissed. I'm fixing it myself. I didn't bother arguing. I sent the video straight to the inspector's office. They sent a deputy that afternoon. The sight of a sheriff's car outside her driveway drew the entire cul-de-sac like moths to a flame. The deputy spoke to her for 10 minutes, then came to me. She's been warned, he said. Do you want to press charges? I said no, for now. Karen's charger stayed disconnected for 2 weeks. During that time, she made a point of parking her Tesla sideways across her driveway every night, as if posing it like a wounded animal for sympathy. Neighbors whispered, and she started spinning her own version of events. I was anti-EV, anti-progress, one of those people who hates change. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who remembered the melted cable incident. Then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, I heard the sound of drilling again. I peeked through my blinds. She wasn't outside, but her husband was, reinstalling the charger conduit, this time fully underground. It looked like he was finally fixing it properly. I almost felt relieved. Until I saw where the new trench led, not to her main breaker box but to the side of my garage. I went out immediately. You're kidding me, I said. He looked up sheepishly. Karen said you two agreed to share a feed line temporarily. She said it'd be cheaper for both of you. My jaw actually dropped. No, she said no such thing. He froze mid-shovel, realizing how badly he'd been set up. Oh, he said quietly. By the next morning, I had the entire setup on camera. The conduit running under the fence, the illegal tap line entering my wall junction box, the evidence as clear as daylight. I didn't go to the HOA this time. I went to the power company. Their field technician arrived with a clipboard and a look that said he'd seen too many of these suburban soap operas before. Ma'am, he said, after a quick inspection, this connection is unauthorized and unsafe. It bypasses both meters. He cut it immediately, sealing both ends with warning tags. Then he added, if someone reconnects this, call us. We'll have the police handle it. I thanked him. For the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile sense of peace return. That night, the Tesla was gone. Her garage was dark. For 2 days, I didn't see her or her husband. Then came the email, from the HOA again. Subject line, urgent electrical safety violation. The body of the message claimed I had been tampering with shared grid access, and that the HOA was imposing an immediate $500 fine pending review. Attached were blurry photos of my electrical box, labeled proof. Karen had struck again, weaponizing bureaucracy. She'd framed the very repair as an offense. But this time, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I sent a response attaching the power company's official disconnection report, complete with technician signature, timestamp, and photos. Please review attached documentation before further correspondence, I wrote. It took less than 24 hours for the HOA president to reply, his tone noticeably subdued. Thank you for your clarification. We will review this matter internally. That was HOA speak for, we messed up. By now, I'd learned that in Karen's world, embarrassment was fuel. The moment she lost face, she came back swinging harder. And she did, literally. 2 nights later, I heard a crash. Something heavy had hit my garage door. When I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, I found a brick lying against the concrete, wrapped in paper. Scrawled across it in thick black marker, "Stop ruining lives." The handwriting was unmistakable, dramatic, sharp, looping, like someone trying too hard to look composed. I didn't call the police this time. I just installed a pair of new security cameras, motion lights, and a discreet solar floodlight aimed straight at her driveway. 2 nights later, she unplugged the camera on her side of the fence. But she didn't know I had 3 more watching from the eaves. I knew what she didn't. The next escalation would be the one that finally finished this. And when it came, it would be louder, brighter, and hotter than anything either of us could have imagined. I looked her dead in the eye. Your secret charger caught fire. Again. She paled. That's not possible. I disconnected everything. Then you should talk to whoever keeps reconnecting it, I said. The fire crew documented everything. Photos, reports, witness statements. Karen stood there trembling as they packed up. One firefighter leaned over and said quietly, "You might want to check your insurance, ma'am." That night, she didn't come outside once. But her lights stayed on all night, every one of them, as if she was trying to drown out the dark. The next morning, the HOA sent another notice. Not to me this time, to her. A formal citation for endangering property. The board attached the fire department's incident report, plus a recommendation for immediate disconnection of all non-certified electrical systems. I didn't see her for 2 days after that. But I heard her. Through the wall. Through the open window at night. Pacing, muttering, drawers slamming. Then came the sound of drilling. It was faint at first, then rhythmic. Not outside, inside. In her garage. Nolan came over again, curious. "You think she's rebuilding something?" he asked. "I think she's incapable of quitting," I said. 2 days later, we got our answer. At 2:15 a.m., my motion lights flared. There was a loud pop, then a bright flash that turned the night white. I bolted upright, heart hammering. Outside, Karen's driveway glowed orange. Flames shot from the corner near her wall charger. I grabbed my extinguisher and ran, just like the first time. Her husband was already outside, panicked, trying to smother the flames with a towel. Karen stood behind him, frozen, whispering something I couldn't hear. The fire crew arrived within minutes, dousing the blaze before it reached the main line. But the Tesla wasn't so lucky. The entire charging port was melted. The rear quarter panel sagged like soft wax. The chief shook his head again. "Same cause," he said grimly. "Faulty wiring feeding from non-certified connections." Karen tried to argue. She claimed it was sabotage. That I'd altered something. That my sprinklers caused a short. But the inspector's flashlight beam traced the melted cable right to her own breaker box. The proof was inescapable. When they finally towed the Tesla away, she stood in the middle of the street, barefoot, her white robe glowing in the flashing lights. "He ruined me," she said softly. "He wanted this." But the truth was simpler. She'd ruined herself. That night, I sat on my porch again, watching the tow truck's taillights fade into the distance. My yard was quiet. My power box hummed steadily, untouched. And for the first time since this began, the silence felt permanent. At least, I thought it was, because I hadn't yet seen the letter she'd already dropped in the HOA mailbox earlier that evening, time-stamped hours before the fire, accusing me of harassment, electrical sabotage, and malicious environmental obstruction. She wasn't finished. She was just changing tactics. The next escalation didn't come with a scream or a spark this time. It came with a smile. A wide, artificially sweet smile on Karen's face one Tuesday morning as she strolled across the property line holding a clipboard like she was a city inspector. I was washing my truck when she approached, the kind of calm confidence that meant she'd cooked up something new. "Morning," she said brightly, too brightly. "I just wanted to inform you that the HOA has decided to install standardized power boxes for community electric use. They'll be placed on corner properties like yours. It's part of a sustainability initiative." I stared at her, soap dripping from the sponge in my hand. "Standardized power boxes?" I repeated. "On private driveways?" She nodded. "Exactly. You're in a great spot for accessibility. We'll just need temporary access to your meter for installation." I almost laughed. She had to be joking. "You're saying the HOA's going to wire up my property to let random people charge their cars?" She held up the clipboard. "Not random people," she said smoothly. "Registered homeowners with electric vehicles. Like me." Her tone had changed since the last disaster. She wasn't shouting anymore. She was performing, polished, bureaucratic, almost smug. She'd moved from sneaky thief to self-declared policymaker. And I knew right away she'd been working on this for weeks. Later that afternoon, an HOA truck actually showed up. 2 guys in reflective vests hopped out with measuring tape and a bright yellow stake. One of them knocked on my door. "We're just marking the potential site for the shared charging unit," he said cheerfully. "Should only take a few minutes." I asked who authorized it. He pointed to the HOA email address on his clipboard. "Karen R.," he said before stopping himself. "Vice Chair of the Green Committee." Of course. She'd created a committee. Probably consisting of herself, her husband, and the echo of her own self-righteousness. I called the HOA office directly. After 10 minutes of being put on hold, the property manager picked up, sounding nervous. "Sir, I understand your concern," she said. "But the committee's proposal hasn't been formally approved yet. They're just surveying possible locations." I told her they could survey all they wanted, but no one was installing anything on my land. She agreed, at least verbally, but I could hear the uncertainty in her tone. Karen had influence. She knew how to sugarcoat tyranny as community improvement. That night, I reviewed the HOA bylaws. Section 8.4.1. Common utility installations may not be placed upon private property without owner consent. I highlighted it, printed it, and taped it to my front door, just in case she forgot. But Karen wasn't one to accept boundaries, legal, moral, or physical. 2 nights later, at 11:45 p.m., my motion light flicked on. I peeked through the blinds and saw the familiar silhouette of her Tesla backed halfway across the line again. She wasn't charging it, she was using it as a light source. The trunk was open, its interior light illuminating a small folding table where she'd laid out papers, a portable printer, and what looked like a label maker. She was making signs. I crept closer through the side yard, quiet enough to hear her muttering to herself. Sustainable Community Power Node, approved by HOA Green Committee. She printed it out and carefully stuck it on my breaker box. Then another, unauthorized tampering subject to fine. It was absurd. I wanted to laugh, but the ridiculousness had stopped being funny a long time ago. It was control she wanted, control wrapped in good intentions. And the worst part? She was good at spinning it that way. The next morning, half the neighborhood had seen her signs. A few even congratulated her at the corner cafe. "It's so inspiring what you're doing for the environment," one woman gushed. I stood there, stirring my coffee, feeling like I'd entered a parody of reality. I needed leverage, something more than evidence of her trespassing or her fake committees. I needed to make her own arrogance corner her. So I called Nolan again. "She's going bureaucratic now," I told him. "She's trying to make theft look like progress." He chuckled. "Then make progress look expensive." The next weekend, I held a neighborhood energy audit workshop. I printed flyers and dropped them in mailboxes, inviting everyone to learn how to reduce bills, prevent grid overload, and spot unsafe wiring. I mentioned free snacks and a quick demonstration of how improper setups can cause major hazards. The words "improper setups" were bolded. People came. More than I expected. About 15 neighbors showed up, curious and carrying folding chairs. I set up in my driveway, next to a mock electrical box with a demonstration panel. I kept it casual, informative, and sprinkled with humor. I showed how improper splices could cause short circuits, how DIY adapters could overheat, and how illegal tie-ins could blow a breaker, or worse, start fires. When I said that part, I let the silence hang for a few seconds, long enough for eyes to wander toward Karen's house. She was standing in her yard, frozen halfway between defiance and panic. The next day, the HOA inbox was flooded with concerns from residents. People wanted inspections, clarity, safety reports. They didn't want to pay for someone else's car catching fire next to their fences. Karen's green crusade had officially backfired. But Karen wasn't done. She had one more move, and it was a big one. She called a special HOA meeting for that Friday. I went, of course, I wouldn't miss her performance. The room was packed, the air thick with a mix of tension and curiosity. She stood at the front, PowerPoint slides glowing behind her. "Fellow residents," she began, voice trembling just enough to sound emotional, "we've faced resistance from people who don't understand progress. But I believe we can still make this neighborhood a model for clean energy, if we come together." She clicked to the next slide, a mock-up of the community power node, featuring a charging post right in front of my house. The image was so obviously photoshopped it was laughable, her Tesla gleaming perfectly under a fake sunset. I raised my hand. "Where exactly did you get the permit for that?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's pending," she said. "But the initiative has overwhelming support." "Actually," I said, standing, "under Section 8.4.1 of the bylaws, that's illegal without written consent. From me." I held up a folder with the rule printed inside. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. She tried to recover. "That's a technicality," she said. "The board can override that for community benefit." But one of the board members, a retired lawyer named Donna, cleared her throat. "No, it can't. The bylaws are explicit. Property owners must consent." Karen's face flickered between fury and disbelief. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. "We're talking about saving the planet, and you people care more about red tape." The morning after the sprinkler incident, Karen's driveway looked like a battlefield. Her Tesla sat streaked with muddy water and grass clippings, its charge port cover dangling like a wounded limb. She was out there in slippers and a silk robe, scrubbing at the car with a look of fury so sharp it could etch glass. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, pretending to be fascinated by the mail. "Morning," I called casually. She didn't answer, but her husband did, a small, resigned wave before disappearing into the garage like a man evacuating a storm zone. Karen straightened, squinting toward me through wet strands of hair. "Did you tamper with my charger again?" she shouted. "Because it's acting weird." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Maybe you should call an electrician," I said. "Preferably one who doesn't dig across other people's lawns." That hit. She froze, visibly trying to choose between rage and dignity, then turned back to her car and slammed the charge port closed. But her restraint didn't last long. By noon, the HOA president, Michael, showed up at my door looking like a man who desperately wanted to be anywhere else. "Hey," he said with an awkward half-smile, holding a clipboard like a shield. "I just wanted to follow up on the ongoing situation between you and Karen." He didn't even need to specify which Karen, there was only one. I invited him in. He sat gingerly at my dining table, flipping through his papers. "She claims her car was damaged due to water intrusion caused by your sprinkler system. She's saying the spray pattern is intentionally directed at her driveway." I couldn't help it, I laughed. "You mean the sprinkler that's been in the same spot for 6 years? He winced. "Look, I know how this sounds. But the board has to log every complaint." "Then log this," I said, sliding my folder across the table. Inside were dated photos, wiring diagrams, and the email thread with the power company documenting her previous illegal hookup. "She's not a victim. She's a repeat offender." He skimmed the pages, his expression tightening. "You've kept detailed records. I've learned that's the only way to survive an HOA with a narcissist neighbor." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I'll speak to her." Again. When he left, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would finally shut things down. But that evening, I noticed something odd. A white van parked halfway down the street with no logos, just tinted windows and a faint humming sound from inside. At first, I figured it was another contractor. But when I went out to take the trash, I noticed an extension cord running from Karen's property to the van. That's when it clicked, she'd found a new source. She wasn't charging at my expense anymore. She was charging off the grid entirely. Literally. I walked over, staying on the sidewalk. Karen was crouched near the van, plugging in her portable battery bank. "Evening," I said. She jumped like I'd caught her robbing a bank. "It's temporary," she snapped. "You wouldn't understand." "Off-grid?" I asked. "You know that thing's supposed to be for construction tools, not EVs, right?" She shot me a glare sharp enough to peel paint. "I'm not asking your permission." "Didn't think you were," I said, turning to leave. "But your battery pack's about to blow a fuse. You're drawing too much current." Her lips parted, ready to spit venom, but then she looked down and noticed the faint wisp of smoke curling from the converter port. She yanked the plug out, and the entire street went quiet except for the faint ticking of hot plastic cooling down. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen looked genuinely scared. She didn't speak for 2 days after that. The van vanished. Her Tesla sat untouched in the garage. I thought maybe, finally, she'd learned the lesson that reality was trying to teach her. But then, one night around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my side fence. Not fast, slow, deliberate. Then a metallic sound like a latch snapping shut. I turned off the lights, peeked through the blinds, and saw the unmistakable gleam of a flashlight beam cutting across my yard. I called out through the open window, voice calm but loud enough to carry. "Karen, whatever you're doing, I'm filming it." The light froze. Then it flicked off. Silence. For a long minute, nothing moved. Then I heard quick steps retreating down the side path. The next morning, I checked the footage. There she was. Hood up, gloves on, crouched next to my power box again. She'd tried to open it. I didn't report it right away. Instead, I sent the footage to Michael, the HOA president, with a single line. "You said you'd talk to her." He called me within the hour. "She's out of control," he said, sounding exhausted. "I'm scheduling a formal hearing." The hearing was the HOA equivalent of a courtroom. Folded chairs, stern faces, and Karen sitting across from me in a white blouse like she was attending a job interview. She looked serene, until the video started playing. The moment the footage showed her prying open my power box, her composure cracked. "That's not me," she protested, even though her own monogrammed gloves were visible in the frame. "Someone edited that." The board didn't buy it. They voted to issue her a written violation and a $1,000 fine. Michael looked like he'd just performed an exorcism. But punishment wasn't what broke her. It was humiliation. Word spread quickly after the meeting. People whispered at the mailbox. Some neighbors stopped waving at her. Her social oxygen vanished overnight. That's when she got desperate. 3 days later, I came home to find a handwritten note taped to my door. No threats this time, just desperation. "Let's end this," it read. "Please. I'll remove everything. No more charging. No HOA complaints. I just want peace." It almost felt sincere. Almost. But the thing about people like Karen is they don't make peace. They manufacture truce to reload. Still, I played along. I replied with a short, polite note. Agreed. "Let's move on." And for a week, she did. No noise, no tampering, no drama. Then Saturday arrived. Hot, dry, perfectly still. I was mowing when I noticed something strange. A faint shimmering haze near the fence, like heat distortion. I stopped the mower, sniffed the air, and smelled burning plastic. The world slowed. I dropped the mower handle and sprinted to the fence. A wisp of gray smoke was rising from the base near the corner where her power line used to run underground. I grabbed the hose, vaulted the fence, and froze. Her Tesla wasn't there. But the cable was, coiled and blackened, half melted into the ground. The mulch around it was smoldering. I sprayed water until the smoke hissed out, then kicked through the debris. The wire had been reconnected. Again. But this time, she'd run it through a makeshift junction box she'd buried under decorative bark. It had shorted out, just inches from my irrigation line. I called the fire department again. They arrived fast, 2 trucks this time. The crew chief crouched by the melted cable, shaking his head. "You're lucky you caught this," he said. "If it had burned another 10 minutes, your fence would have gone up." Karen came running out just as they started coiling their hoses. "What happened?" she demanded, breathless. That's when I knew she'd lost the room. Nobody likes being guilt-tripped by someone who nearly set their driveway on fire. After the meeting, she didn't look at me once. But that night, I noticed her garage light flicking on and off again, like a strobe. She was pacing, phone pressed to her ear. The next morning, her Tesla was gone. For a brief, glorious week, peace returned. The HOA withdrew her proposal. The neighborhood chat groups went quiet. Even the air felt calmer. Then, one Friday evening, I came home to find a new sight. A portable generator sitting behind her fence, its muffled hum just audible over the crickets. She was running her house off it. Solar lights in the yard, extension cords everywhere, even a fan propped in her window. It was as if she was trying to prove she didn't need the grid, or me, anymore. I almost admired the stubbornness. Almost. Then came the smell. Acrid, sharp, oily smoke drifting over my fence like poison perfume. I peeked over and saw the generator belching soot into the night air. Next to it sat a red jerrycan of gasoline, open, half full. The absurdity of it hit me. The woman who preached green energy had turned her backyard into a gas fume hazard zone. I called the non-emergency line. The fire department arrived quietly, lights flashing but sirens off. They inspected, warned, and left. Karen, humiliated again, shouted at them from her porch that it was temporary. But the next morning, the HOA president called her directly. He told her that after 3 separate safety incidents, she was officially barred from any energy-related committees. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt something else, a creeping sense that it wasn't over. People like Karen didn't just retreat. They reloaded. That Sunday night, I heard a sound I hadn't heard in weeks, the quiet hum of a Tesla charger. I looked out my window, heart sinking. Her car was back, parked exactly where it had been the first time, and sure enough, a cable ran neatly under the fence again. She'd reconnected. But not to my old box. This time, the line disappeared into the ground somewhere near the fence post. Nolan came by the next morning to help me trace it. We followed it under the soil until it emerged at the far corner, tied directly into my irrigation control line, which ran parallel to my underground power feed. She'd used the conduit trench from the first installation to snake a new line under my lawn. We both just stared at it for a while, speechless. Then Nolan said, "You know what's poetic? You could kill her power with 1 sprinkler cycle." I smiled finally. Because he was right. So I set a timer on my irrigation system for 3 a.m., the exact time her Tesla usually charged. That night, as the sprinklers roared to life and drenched her driveway, the charger tripped, sparks hissed, and the faint pop of a breaker echoed through the quiet street. Her lights went out. Mine stayed on. The war wasn't over, but I was done defending. It was time to end it. The sticker stayed there for 2 days before I peeled it off. Just plain vinyl with black text, no signature, no fingerprint, nothing but intent. I didn't call the police. I didn't email the HOA. I just took a photo, saved it to my growing folder labeled Evidence, Karen Incidents, and went back inside. Because by now, I'd learned the only way to deal with her kind of madness was to let it expose itself. Still, that night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak sounded like a footstep. Every motion light flicker made me check the window. I told myself she couldn't legally come near me anymore, not with the restraining order. But people like Karen didn't think laws applied to them. They thought laws were suggestions for other people. By the 3rd night, something changed. No lights from her house. No noise. The "for sale" sign still stood in her yard, but the blinds were drawn, the driveway empty. Even her husband's SUV was gone. It was eerie. The absence of chaos almost felt unnatural. A week passed like that. Then the realtor's lockbox appeared on her front door. Her house was officially listed. The day after, a "sold" sticker slapped across the sign like the final chapter of a very expensive book. I didn't even see any buyers. Just a moving truck 2 mornings later and a man with a clipboard supervising a cleaning crew. The Karen era, it seemed, was over. I took that weekend to finally fix the lawn she'd ruined, reseed the trench she'd carved through my flower bed, and replace the damaged section of fence. Every nail felt like punctuation. By Sunday evening, I was grilling on the porch with Nolan, laughing about how the neighborhood already felt 10 degrees quieter. "You think she'll ever actually leave you alone?" he asked, sipping his beer. "She's gone," I said. "And if she isn't, she's out of ammunition." He raised his bottle. "To the end of the current." We toasted. But peace has a way of fading faster than you expect. 2 days later, I got a letter. Not from the HOA, not from any lawyer, but from the county fire marshal's office. A formal notice of inspection. It said there'd been new information provided regarding improper electrical modifications on my property that might have contributed to a neighborhood safety hazard. I knew instantly whose information that was. When the inspector showed up that Thursday, he wasn't what I expected. Young guy, early 30s, clipboard, bodycam blinking red. He was polite but serious. "I just need to verify the current configuration of your outdoor electrical," he said. Anonymous report suggested non-compliant grounding. "Anonymous," I repeated, smiling tightly. "Sure." He did his job, methodical, precise, and fair. Checked my meter, outlet, junction boxes, irrigation controls. Even asked about the GFCI I'd installed months earlier. When he was done, he looked up from his note. "Everything here's perfect," he said. "Actually one of the cleanest residential setups I've seen." "Can I get that in writing?" I asked. He laughed. "You'll have the report by tomorrow." I did. And I sent it straight to the HOA, preemptively, just in case she tried to spin another story. The next morning, the HOA president replied with one sentence: "We've closed all pending matters regarding your property." That should have been the end. But that night, while I was taking the trash out, I saw headlights in her driveway. Not a moving truck this time. A small silver sedan idling in the dark, engine humming. I recognized the license plate before I saw the driver. Karen. Her hair was different, pulled back, plain, no makeup, but it was her. She was sitting in the car, hands gripping the wheel, eyes staring at my house. When she realized I'd seen her, she killed the lights and drove off. No confrontation. No words. Just silence. I told myself it was closure, some obsessive loop in her mind she needed to complete before moving on. But the next night she came back. And the night after that. Always between midnight and 2 a.m., engine idling for a few minutes before disappearing down the street. By the 5th night, I called the police. The officer took one look at the footage from my security cameras and sighed. "Technically she's not breaking the restraining order if she's staying on public roadway," he said. "But we'll make a note." The next day, I added another camera, this one facing the cul-de-sac. That evening, Nolan came over again. I told him about the car. He frowned. "She's escalating again, but quieter." "That's worse." "Why?" "Because it means she's trying to figure out how to hurt you without getting caught." That thought stayed with me. I double-checked every lock, every line, every breaker. I even swapped my outdoor power covers for metal-clad ones. It was like fortifying a castle against a single ghost. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the car stopped appearing. A week of peace passed. Then 2. The for sale sign was gone. The listing taken down. Her house stood empty, windows reflecting nothing but sky. Until one Sunday morning, I saw movement inside. A man, mid-50s, plaid shirt, tool belt, carrying a ladder through the front door. New owner, I guessed. I walked over later that afternoon to welcome him. His name was Tom, friendly guy, contractor type. We chatted about renovations, utilities, neighborhood quirks. When I mentioned the previous owner, his smile dimmed. "Oh, her," he said. "Yeah. The bank told me she defaulted halfway through closing. Something about an insurance dispute. The sale was repossessed." "So she didn't actually sell?" He shook his head. "Nope. House sat empty until the bank cleared it." "You're telling me she still lives around here?" "Apparently," I said quietly. Over the next few weeks, Tom gutted half the place. New wiring, drywall, flooring. The smell of sawdust drifted over every day. It was nice hearing drills instead of shouting. Then one evening, he knocked on my door. "Hey, you're the electrical guy, right?" I laughed. "Involuntary expert, yeah." He held up a bundle of melted cable, blackened, brittle, familiar. "Found this buried under the garage floor while tearing out the old wiring. It's fused into the concrete. Any idea what it was?" I took one look and knew. Her old line. The illegal feed she'd buried months ago, the one that caught fire the first time. Still there, fossilized beneath her mistake. Tom whistled. "She's lucky she didn't burn the whole block down." We both stared at it for a moment, that charred relic of entitlement. Then I smiled. "You know what's funny?" I said. "She always swore it wasn't her fault." Tom laughed, tossed it into the trash bin, and went back to work. For the first time, I felt like the story was finally buried, literally. Then, 2 weeks later, the rain came. A long, hard thunderstorm that turned the cul-de-sac into a shallow river. Around midnight, lightning cracked so close it shook the windows. Power flickered once, twice, then steadied. I checked the meter, all fine. But when I glanced outside, something glowed faintly from Karen's old property, an orange shimmer near the garage. At first I thought it was a reflection. Then the smell hit, burnt insulation, wet ozone. I ran across the street with my flashlight. The glow was coming from a small junction box Tom had just installed, now sparking wildly. I grabbed the cutoff switch and killed the line before it could spread. The smell lingered, electrical, acrid, wrong. Tom came running out in pajamas. "What the hell happened?" I pointed to the ground. "Your subfeed's arcing. Probably hit by lightning." We traced the wire, following it through the mud until we found the culprit, a half-buried metal fitting, badly corroded, with a frayed copper strand sticking out. "That's not mine," Tom said. But I recognized it instantly. The old buried splice from Karen's illegal feed. It had never been fully removed. It had just waited there, quietly, beneath everything new, until the storm found it. I helped him cut it clean and seal it properly, the rain pouring down as we worked. By the time we finished, the glow was gone, the smell faded, and the neighborhood slept again. The next morning, Tom handed me a small plastic bag. Inside was the corroded splice, sealed and tagged. "You should keep it," he said. "You earned it." I laughed. "Thanks, but I think I've had enough souvenirs." That night, I sat on my porch with the bag in my hand anyway. The twisted copper caught the porch light like a scar. I realized Karen's legacy wasn't the chaos she caused, it was the quiet damage she left behind. The kind that only shows up later, when you think you've already fixed everything. The neighborhood eventually moved on. The HOA stopped sending letters. People stopped whispering. Tom finished his renovations, repainted the house, and even joked about installing solar panels. Real, legal ones. Sometimes I still think about that first night when I found her Tesla plugged into my box. How small it seemed. How harmless. Just a cable. Just a neighbor. But that's how it always starts, with a small act of entitlement disguised as convenience. And before you know it, your whole life is wired into someone else's chaos. I threw the splice into the trash, turned off the porch light, and went inside. When the power clicked softly as the breaker settled, I couldn't help but smile. The current was finally mine again, steady, clean, and uninterrupted. The storm had passed.